I never imagined my quiet retirement as governor would end with an HOA president trying to steal my home of 50 years through a massive fraud scheme. But when they destroyed my late wife's memorial bench and tried bulldozing my rose garden at midnight, I had to ask myself, what would happen if they discovered they just messed with the wrong governor? Welcome, and please subscribe for more HOA stories. The banging on my front door jolted me awake at 7 a.m. sharp. I was already tired from last night's late budget meeting at the governor's office, but someone clearly had other plans for my Sunday morning. Opening the door, I found Barbara Wilson, our new HOA president, tapping her foot with that familiar look of disapproval on her face. "Governor Williams, your roses are 3 inches taller than regulation height," she announced, waving her measuring tape like a weapon. "This is your 4th violation this month." I looked past her at my wife Sarah's beloved rose garden. The one thing I'd promised to keep alive after cancer took her last year. Every morning for 49 years, she'd tend to those roses while I had my coffee on the porch. Now they were apparently a crime against the neighborhood. "Barbara," I said calmly, "those roses have been here since 1900. The HOA didn't even exist until 1990. She pushed her designer sunglasses up her nose and thrust a paper into my hands. "New bylaws were passed last month. You should attend the meetings if you want a say in things. Being governor doesn't make you special here." I bit back a response about how I'd missed the meeting because I was handling a state emergency. Instead, I watched her march across my lawn, measuring tape still in hand, to harass Tom Patterson about his mailbox color. That afternoon, while sorting through my mail, I found something strange, a letter, addressed to current resident, rather than my name. Inside was an eviction notice, claiming I had 30 days to vacate the property. My hands started shaking. This had to be a mistake. I called Tom right away. He'd been my neighbor for 30 years, and served on the original HOA board. "Hey, did you get any weird mail today?" "John, thank goodness you called." Tom's voice was urgent. "I just saw your house listed for sale on Zillow, posted this morning." My stomach dropped. "That's impossible. I own this house outright." "Well, somebody thinks differently. The listing agent is Wilson Real Estate Group. Barbara Wilson." The pieces started falling into place. Her constant harassment about the roses, the sudden new bylaws, the eviction notice. This wasn't about garden regulations at all. I spent the next hour digging through my home office, searching for the original deed. When I finally found it in Sarah's old filing system, another document fell out, a handwritten letter from her that I'd never seen before. "My dearest John," it began, "if you're reading this, something's gone wrong with the house. Check the bottom of my rose garden, 3rd bush from the left. I buried copies of all our important papers there in a waterproof box. You always teased me about being too careful with documents, but I had a feeling we'd need them someday." Even after she was gone, Sarah was still protecting our home. I grabbed a shovel and headed to the garden, not caring that I was still in my suit from yesterday's meetings. As I dug beneath her favorite peace rose, I heard Barbara's voice coming from next door. "Of course it's legal," she was saying to someone on her phone. "The digital transition mixed up some ownership records, and we're simply correcting them. By the time anyone figures it out, the sale will be final." She laughed. "Even the governor can't fight City Hall." My shovel hit something hard. Inside the metal box, I found exactly what we needed. Our original deed, property surveys, and every HOA document we'd ever signed, including one from 1990, that specifically protected our pre-existing garden. I looked up to see Barbara watching me from across the fence, her phone call forgotten. For just a second, her confident mask slipped when she saw the box in my hands. Then she turned and rushed toward her house, already dialing another number. The sun was setting behind my home of 50 years, casting long shadows through Sarah's roses. As I held our property documents, I realized this wasn't just about keeping our house anymore. How many other homes had Barbara corrected during the digital transition? And more importantly, how did she not realize that a governor might know a thing or two about investigating fraud? I picked up my phone and called James Martinez, our state attorney. "James, remember how you said you've been looking for a solid case against real estate fraud? I think I've found something interesting in my own backyard." I heard Barbara's voice again, now shouting into her phone about emergency HOA meetings and document shredding. But for the first time all day, I smiled. Sarah had always said our little Victorian house had chosen us for a reason. Maybe she was right. I couldn't sleep after finding that eviction notice. So I went down to my basement where I keep all my important papers. My hands were shaking as I pulled out the old metal box Sarah and I had bought when we first moved in. Inside was our original deed from 1974. The paper yellow with age, but still perfectly readable. Next to it lay 50 years of property tax receipts, each one carefully filed by my Sarah. She was always the organized one. The sound of a car door slamming made me look up through the basement window. A fancy real estate agent's car had parked in front of my house. My neighbor Tom Patterson was running across his lawn in his pajamas, trying to wave them away. I hurried upstairs and opened my front door just in time to hear the agent say, "The open house is scheduled for this weekend." "There must be some mistake," I said, still holding my old deed. "I never listed my home for sale." The agent gave me a puzzled look and pulled out her tablet. According to the county records, this property was just listed by the Valley Creek HOA. She turned the screen toward me, and my heart nearly stopped. There was my home, listed for $850,000, with pictures I'd never seen before. I called my old friend James at the county records office right away. While I waited for him to check the files, I went through more of my papers. That's when I found something strange. A notice from 6 months ago about the HOA modernizing their records. Barbara had made a big deal about going paperless, saying it would make everything easier. I hadn't paid much attention then. I was dealing with a state budget crisis. Tom came over with his laptop. He's good with computers, much better than me. Together we looked at the HOA's new online system. My stomach dropped when we found my property record. According to their database, I had transferred my deed to the HOA during the digital transition, but I had never signed anything like that. "Look at this," Tom said, pointing to his screen. He'd found 5 other homes in our neighborhood that had similar transfers, all belonging to people who'd lived here for decades. All of them had gotten complaints from Barbara about their yards or paint colors in the past year. Just then, James called back. "Governor," he said, his voice serious, "something's not right here. The digital deed has a signature date from 3 months ago, but according to my records, you were giving a speech in the Capitol that day. I'm looking at the video right now." My security team called next. They'd spotted someone taking pictures of my house. When they went to investigate, the person claimed to be measuring for renovation work ordered by the HOA. I hadn't approved any renovations. I was writing all this down when I got an email from Barbara. "Just wanted to remind you that the HOA has full authority to maintain community standards. The buyers this weekend are a lovely young couple. They understand the importance of proper lawn care. Unlike some of our current residents, the pieces were starting to fit together, and I didn't like the picture they made." Barbara's real estate company, handling all the HOA's transferred properties, the sudden complaints about longtime residents, the mysterious digital transition. My years in politics had taught me to spot a scheme, and this had all the marks of one. A movement caught my eye through the window. More cars were pulling up outside. Through the gathering darkness, I could see Barbara directing people with clipboards toward my front porch. She looked up, saw me watching, and gave me that same smirk she'd had at last week's HOA meeting when she'd complained about my roses. My phone buzzed. A text from Linda Thompson, the HOA secretary. "Governor, please check your email. There's something you need to see about the records transfer. But don't let Barbara know I sent it." The emergency HOA meeting was packed with worried neighbors when I walked in. I hadn't worn my usual suit and tie. Today I came in my gardening clothes, dirt still fresh on my knees from checking on Sarah's roses one last time. Barbara's face turned red seeing me dressed so casually. She always hated how I kept working in my garden even after becoming governor. I took my seat in the front row, placing my old leather briefcase on the floor. Inside was every piece of paper showing I owned my home since 1973. My neighbor Tom sat next to me, squeezing my shoulder for support. The room buzzed with whispers. Nobody had ever seen an emergency meeting called so suddenly. Barbara stood at the podium in her fancy red blazer, tapping her manicured nails on the wood. "Governor Williams," she said my title like it was something gross. "I assume you're here to discuss the property situation?" She smiled that fake smile I'd seen too. Many times when she complained about my garden, hose being visible from the street. "You could say that," I replied, keeping my voice steady like Sarah taught me during my first campaign. "I'm here about you trying to sell my home without my permission." The room got so quiet you could hear the air conditioning hum. Barbara's smile got bigger, more dangerous. She pulled out a thick stack of papers from her designer bag. "Actually, according to our new digital record system, you haven't owned that property since last year's database update." I stood up slowly, my knees creaking a bit. "Barbara, I've lived in that house for 50 years. I have every document since 1973 right here." I patted my briefcase. "You can't just type something into a computer and make my home yours to sell." "Oh, but I can." She waved her papers around. "See, when we updated our systems, we found several irregularities. Your property wasn't properly registered under the new HOA guidelines. Therefore, ownership has defaulted to the association." The neighbors started muttering. Mrs. Rodriguez from across the street stood up. "That's ridiculous! John's lived there longer than anyone." Barbara banged her gavel. The rules are the rules. If you don't properly register your property during a system update, you forfeit your rights. It's all in Section 47B of the new bylaws. That's when I smiled, reaching into my briefcase. Interesting you mention those new bylaws, Barbara. I have here the original HOA agreement from 1980. It clearly states that any changes to registration requirements must be approved by a 75% vote of homeowners. I pulled out another paper, and look what I found in the county records. No such vote ever happened. Barbara's face went pale. She shuffled through her papers faster. That's not relevant. The digital transition supersedes the law, came a deep voice from the back. James Martinez, my old friend and state attorney, stood up, because I'd be very interested in hearing how a computer database supersedes 50 years of legal property records. Barbara's hands started shaking. This meeting is adjourned. She grabbed her papers, but in her hurry, one fluttered to the ground. Tom picked it up before she could snatch it back. Hey, this is a sale contract. Dated 3 months ago? Tom's voice rose in shock. You've been trying to sell John's house since January? The room erupted. Barbara backed away from the podium as neighbors started shouting questions. Through the chaos, I watched her pull out her phone, fingers flying over the screen. Later, we'd discover she was deleting emails, but she didn't know about the backups. Linda had already saved. Barbara, I said, my voice cutting through the noise. I think you should know. I just signed an executive order this morning creating a state task force on housing fraud. Would you like to guess who's leading it? She ran for the door, high heels clicking on the tile floor. But James was faster, and 2 police officers were already waiting in the lobby. I saw her designer bag drop to the floor, spilling more papers. Papers that would lead us down a rabbit hole none of us expected. Tom picked up the gavel Barbara had left behind. I moved for an immediate vote to remove Barbara Wilson as HOA president. All in favor? Every hand in the room shot up. But somehow I knew this was just the beginning. I sat in my study, staring at the walls of evidence we'd gathered against Barbara. Something wasn't adding up. The paper trail was too messy for someone as careful as her. That's when Linda Thompson, our HOA secretary of 15 years, knocked on my door with tears in her eyes and a USB drive in her shaking hands. Governor Williams, I can't sleep at night anymore, she whispered, closing the door behind her. Barbara didn't just target your home. There's so much more. My security team swept the USB drive before I plugged it into my computer. What we found made my blood run cold. Spreadsheets, property records, fake documents, all meticulously organized by date and neighborhood. Barbara hadn't just changed my property records. She'd been slowly taking over homes throughout the entire county. I called Tom Patterson, who lived next door to 3 empty houses. Barbara's company had recently acquired. He came over immediately, bringing his daughter Sarah, a data analyst who'd been suspicious about the neighborhood's property records for months. Look at this pattern, Sarah said, pointing to her laptop screen. Every target is either elderly, too busy with work to notice the paperwork changes, or living out of state. Barbara's company swoops in, claims there are HOA violations, then suddenly discovers ownership problems. Linda's hands trembled as she pulled up more files. I started keeping records when she first joined the HOA board 5 years ago. At first, it was just weird things. Changing meeting minutes, losing complaint forms from certain homeowners. Then I noticed property documents going missing from our files. Tom paced my study, his face getting redder by the minute. Remember the Andersons? Lived here for 40 years? Barbara claimed they'd agreed to sell their house because of HOA violations. They moved to Florida last year, heartbroken. I picked up my phone, but Linda grabbed my arm. Wait, there's more. Barbara has a whole network. Real estate agents, contractors, even someone at the county records office. They're all in on it. Sarah pulled up another document that made my heart stop. A list of future targets. 30 more homes in our neighborhood alone. Next to each address were notes about the owner's vulnerabilities. Next to my name it said, too busy with state duties to notice changes. Wife deceased. Emotional attachment to property makes proper legal review unlikely. They'd been studying us, learning our weaknesses, using our lives against us. I thought about my rose garden, the one Sarah had helped me plant when we first moved in. Barbara hadn't targeted it because it violated HOA rules. She'd targeted it because she knew it would distract me with grief and anger while she worked on stealing my home. Linda showed us emails revealing Barbara's next move. She planned to present evidence at next week's HOA meeting that several more residents had failed to properly transfer their deeds during the digital transition. It would look like a simple clerical error that just needed to be corrected. The thing is, Sarah said, pointing to her screen, I checked the original county records. None of these ownership changes ever went through proper legal channels. Barbara's been creating parallel paperwork that looks official, but isn't properly registered. She's counting on no one checking the actual county records. As we dug deeper, Tom noticed something odd about the dates. Every property takeover attempt happened during major state events, when you'd be too busy to pay attention to neighborhood drama. I sat back in my chair, finally understanding Barbara's full game. She hadn't just been stealing homes. She'd been building an empire right under our noses, using our trust in the HOA system against us. The question wasn't just about saving my home anymore. It was about stopping her before she destroyed our entire community. Linda stood up straighter, her fear turning to anger. I have copies of everything, Governor. Every email, every fake document, every secret meeting recording. I've been saving them for years, waiting for someone strong enough to take her down. I looked at the faces around me, Linda's determination, Tom's righteous anger, Sarah's analytical focus. Barbara might have money and connections, but we had truth and community on our side. And she was about to learn that messing with people's homes was a dangerous game, especially when one of those people had the full power of the governor's office behind them. Sarah's laptop pinged with a new alert. Barbara had just called an emergency HOA meeting for tomorrow night. We looked at each other, knowing this was it. The time for gathering evidence was over. Now we had to decide. Did we spring our trap, or was Barbara about to spring hers? I was just getting ready for bed when my phone buzzed. It was Tom, his voice shaking. "They're here with bulldozers!" I rushed to my window and saw the yellow machines crawling up my street like giant monsters in the dark. My security team was already moving, their flashlights cutting through the night as they surrounded 3 men in construction gear. The HOA president gave us permission, one worker claimed, waving a document that looked official. But I knew better. I'd been signing official papers as governor for years. Even from my window, I could tell this one was fake. My hands were shaking as I called the police, but my voice stayed steady. I'd learned that trick from years of handling state emergencies. While waiting, I opened my laptop and started live streaming everything from my security cameras. If Barbara wanted to play dirty, she'd have to do it with the whole internet watching. The police arrived in minutes, their sirens silent but lights flashing. Officer Rodriguez, who'd grown up in this neighborhood, took one look at the paperwork and shook his head. "This authorization is dated for next week," he said, holding back a smile. Barbara hadn't even bothered to check the dates when she forged it. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The next morning, while my security detail changed shifts, something caught my eye through the kitchen window. Barbara was standing by Sarah's memorial bench, phone in hand, talking to someone. Before I could get outside, she was gone. But what she left behind broke my heart more than any bulldozer could. Sarah's beautiful bench, where she used to read stories to our grandkids, lay in pieces. The bronze plaque with her name was missing. Our favorite quote about love and roses was scratched out. 50 years of memories, shattered like the marble pieces scattered across my lawn. I heard Tom's back door slam. He was already running over with his phone out, recording everything. Linda from across the street joined us, crying when she saw the destruction. "I got it all on my security camera," she said, pulling up the footage on her phone. Barbara did this herself, not even an hour ago. But then Linda gasped, zooming in on her screen. In the background of her footage, barely visible behind Barbara's shoulder, was a man I recognized, the same developer, who'd been trying to buy up the whole block for years. They were both looking at papers, pointing at different houses on our street. My security team found 3 more hidden cameras installed around my property, all linked to an unknown IP address. Barbara hadn't just been harassing me. She'd been studying my schedule, learning when the house was least protected. I sat in my garden, surrounded by the pieces of Sarah's bench, and felt something change inside me. Barbara didn't know about the hidden camera in Sarah's old birdhouse, the one I'd never had the heart to take down, or about the GPS tracker my security team had quietly placed on her car after the first threat started, or that her phone had been automatically connecting to my property's guest Wi-Fi, logging every visit. As I picked up pieces of marble, my phone lit up with messages from neighbors sharing their own security footage. Barbara had been busy last night, putting condemned notices on every house owned by someone over 60. But she'd made a big mistake. The notices used the official state seal, my seal. I looked at the broken pieces of Sarah's bench, remembering how she always said everything happens for a reason. Maybe she was right. Barbara thought she was destroying evidence. Instead, she'd given me exactly what I needed to stop her. Proof. She was impersonating state officials. That evening, as I watched the sunset paint my roses gold, my phone buzzed with an alert from my security system. Barbara was back, this time with a whole team of people in suits. But when she saw the state police cars parked quietly along the street, her face changed. She finally realized what her greed had done. She hadn't just picked a fight with an old man who loved his garden. She'd declared war on a governor who knew how to fight back. The morning started with sirens, not the usual kind that came with my security detail, but the loud ones that meant business. I was sipping my morning coffee when 3 state police cars pulled up to Barbara's house across the street. My neighbor Tom ran over, still in his bathrobe, nearly spilling his own coffee. "You won't believe what Linda just sent me," he said, holding up his phone. The HOA's financial records were displayed on the screen, showing money transfers to offshore accounts. Barbara hadn't just been stealing homes. She'd been running a full-blown criminal operation. I watched from my porch as Barbara emerged, still wearing her designer pajamas and that pearl necklace she always bragged about. Even now, she kept her nose in the air like she owned the whole neighborhood. The officers read her rights while she stood there, hands cuffed behind her back, her perfect hair getting messed up in the morning breeze. "This is ridiculous," she shrieked, loud enough for the whole street to hear. "Do you know who I am? I'm friends with Senator Parker." That made me chuckle. Parker had lost his seat last year after his own scandal. Neighbors started coming out of their houses, some still in bathrobes. Others dressed for work but too curious to leave. Mrs. Johnson, from number 42, brought out her phone, recording everything. Her hands were shaking. Barbara had threatened to fine her last month for having a wheelchair ramp that was an eyesore. The state investigator, Agent Rodriguez, walked over to brief me. 3 counties, 17 neighborhoods, and over 40 homes targeted, all following the same pattern. Digital records mysteriously changed, sudden eviction notices, quick sales to Barbara's real estate company, and massive profits from flipping the properties. "Governor," Rodriguez said, handing me a thick folder, "your home wasn't the first, but it'll be the last. We found evidence going back 5 years. Some victims lost everything." A news van pulled up, Channel 5, then another from Channel 9. Barbara saw them and suddenly changed her tune. "Governor Williams orchestrated this whole thing," she screamed, mascara running down her face. "He's trying to discredit me before the election. Ask him about the bribes." I stayed on my porch, calm as could be, drinking my coffee. The reporters looked at me, then at Barbara being loaded into a police car, then back at me. They knew who to believe. 20 years in public service had taught me one thing: the truth always comes out. Linda arrived, carrying boxes of documents. She looked tired but proud. "I've been gathering evidence for months," she told the officers. "Every fake document, every changed record, every illegal sale." Barbara thought nobody would notice because she only targeted older residents who might not check their digital records. More police cars arrived. They were heading to Barbara's real estate office downtown. Tom squeezed my shoulder. "Sarah would be proud," he said quietly. "Remember how she always said your stubbornness would save the day someday?" The investigation was spreading like wildfire. By noon, we learned Barbara's company had connections to similar schemes in 2 other states. The FBI was getting involved. My phone kept ringing with calls from other governors, senators, even the attorney general. Barbara's last words before the police car door closed were about my upcoming re-election campaign. She thought this was all about politics. She never understood that some things matter more than power, like home, community, and doing what's right. I looked at my rose garden, at Sarah's broken memorial bench, at our home of 50 years. A young reporter approached, microphone ready, asking about my campaign plans. I smiled, thinking about the retirement papers sitting unsigned on my desk at the Capitol. Barbara had assumed I was fighting to keep my position as governor. But as I watched her being driven away, I realized this was never about staying in power. The real question was, how many other Barbaras were out there, thinking they could prey on good people just trying to live peacefully in their homes? Tomorrow, I would make my big announcement at the Capitol. But today, I had some roses to tend to and a memorial bench to rebuild. The morning sun hit my face as I knelt in my rose garden, carefully planting a new Sarah's Love rose bush. My hands weren't as steady as they used to be, but each flower I planted felt like a small victory. Tom Patterson, my neighbor of 30 years, walked over with 2 steaming cups of coffee. "Never thought I'd see the day Barbara Wilson would end up behind bars," Tom said, handing me a cup. "The news is calling it the biggest real estate scam in state history." I smiled, remembering how this all started with one simple rose garden dispute. The media trucks had finally left my driveway. Yesterday, after camping out for 3 weeks straight. Turns out, people love stories about corrupt HOA, presidents trying to steal the governor's house. Linda Thompson joined us, carrying a thick folder. As our new HOA president, she'd been working overtime to fix the mess Barbara left behind. "You won't believe what we found in the old records," she said, sitting on Sarah's new memorial bench. Barbara tried this same scheme in 3 other neighborhoods before moving here. She'd target older residents, mess with property records during tech upgrades, then force quick sales through her company. My security detail, Mike, walked up with his morning report. Sir, we've identified 28 more victims across the state. The FBI's involved now. He paused, then added, and Mrs. Wilson's trying to make a deal with the prosecutors. I shook my head, remembering Barbara's face when they arrested her. She'd screamed about conspiracy theories and threatened to expose my corrupt administration. What she never understood was that I'd spent my whole career fighting people like her, folks who thought rules didn't apply to them. The neighborhood kids rode by on their bikes, waving at Governor Bill as they passed. One of them, little Annie from 2 doors down, stopped to give me a hand-drawn card. Inside was a picture of my rose garden with the words "Our Hero" written in crayon. My phone buzzed. Another message from the state attorney general. They wanted me to testify at Barbara's trial next month. I thought about declining, about just enjoying my retirement in peace. But then I looked at Sarah's bench, remembered how Barbara's goons had smashed the original one, and knew I had to see this through. Tom helped me up, my knees creaking in protest. You know what Sarah would say about all this? He asked with a knowing smile. She'd laugh herself silly, I replied, touching the smooth wood of her new bench. Then she'd tell me to stop fussing and plant more roses. Linda spread out some papers on the bench. Look at these new HOA bylaws we've drafted. Full digital transparency, triple verification for property record changes, and mandatory resident voting on major decisions. She pointed to a specific section. We're calling it the Williams Rule. I felt tears welling up but blinked them away. Sarah always said crying was just the heart's way of watering hope. And right now, hope was blooming all over our neighborhood. Families who'd lost their homes to Barbara's scheme were moving back in. The community was healing. As the morning wore on, more neighbors stopped by. Each had a story about Barbara's bullying, about feeling helpless against her schemes. But now they also had stories of victory, of justice, of community coming together. My rose garden had become a symbol of standing up to corruption, one flower at a time. I looked at my home of 50 years, its Victorian charm unchanged despite Barbara's best efforts to take it away. Sometimes the biggest battles start in the smallest places. A garden, a bench, a home. And sometimes, just refusing to back down can change everything. Standing there with my neighbors, watching the roses catch the morning light, I realized this wasn't just about saving my house anymore. It was about protecting the places and people we love. About standing up to bullies who think they're above the law. I picked up my gardening tools, ready to plant another rose bush. After all, I had a lot more flowers to plant and a community to rebuild.